Go to Thursday's Telegraph. Nick, perhaps this isn't the best time for this protest.
Yeah, Trans Day of Vengeance protest to hit Washington in wake of Nashville shooting. This is organised by the Trans Radical Activist Network. And this poster that's been getting banned off Twitter, it says Trans Day of Vengeance, and it says stop trans genocide. So these people actually think there's a genocide of trans people. Now, whether some people are disingenuously spreading that, or whether they actually genuinely believe it in some sort of deluded
They're
state.
disingenuinely spreading it, and then people genuinely
and then certain people believe it. If especially if they're mentally disturbed, they then do crazy things. So it's completely, it's terrible. And obviously vengeance, generally not great. Maybe if it's John Wick or a Clint Eastwood Western, but generally not a great thing to have a day of vengeance.
Then they are later saying, oh no, it's about unity, not inciting violence.
Yes.
Vengeance is not the word for that.
And this comes from the Trans Radical Activist Network. There was another thing, Trans Resistance Network, a very similar thing, that said the Nashville shooting isn't one tragedy, it's two, because we also have to think about what inspired the person to do it. And this has been absolutely disgusting. The media coverage of this, NBC was saying, but what about the trans people that could now be sort of persecuted? And Reuters described it as a former Christian student, Christian school former student. It's like, no, I mean, the media's trying to cover it up in a disgusting way and change the narrative. Yeah, and it's all been pretty appalling. What happened is 3 kids were killed and 3 adults, absolutely disgusting. Possibly a hate crime against Christians, which we'll wait and see when the manifesto comes out. The mainstream media treatment of it has been appalling. This Trans Day of Vengeance has to not go ahead. It's a terrible thing, and that's all.
It's terrible timing, but even with this event not happening, it's a somewhat ridiculous event, because this idea that there's a genocide happening is massively false. I mean, numbers are just going through the roof. That's the point. It's an ideology that's captured, arguably, certainly young teenage girls. And the other thing is that the reason they're doing it is because of this proposed legislation, and they say here to ban gender-affirming care across the US. No, it's to ban gender-affirming care to children. Right. That's the point.
And gender-affirming care being a euphemism for basically
just like instantly you are that person. And also, by the way, then they use words like we're the most at-risk community and stuff. This all started from a statistic of black Brazilian prostitutes. Black Brazilian trans prostitutes. So when everyone said, oh, the rates of murder is the highest of whatever, that's the statistic that's always used. Actually, the fact is in the UK, it's very, very few, and certainly over the last 10 years. And, when you have women being killed every 2 days or so, I know there's obviously a disparity between percentages and whatnot, but it just seems incredible. Also, I like their thing on the poster. They say, wear a mask.
Well, because that's the silo that they're in. It's the wear a mask is the trans thing. This thing is really tragic, the trans story, because it's, as I say, it's the death of love. It's these people are basically willingly being castrated. They're being neutered. They're preventing themselves from having children forever for this. And these are children who want to go ahead with this whatever they are. They're 10, 20, 30 years old. And it's
well, some of them we've had teenage girls, 12-year-old girls, and going on these hormones. Yeah. And it's been proven, like you say, they become infertile.
And I think the worst thing about it is sort of the desire to be a victim. These are people who are not necessarily victims to begin with, and they feel the need to actually be a victim. And the way they become a victim is by maybe it's...
Well, that's meant to be, you see it as a positive thing for them. Yeah. But I agree in terms of this constant, thing of trying to appropriate the Holocaust. Yeah. And then the other thing is, all these institutions around America and the West, arguably, have utterly capitulated to this ideology. And really, this is all kicking off. You know why they want a day of vengeance? Because now some people are going, you know what? No, I'm sorry, you can't have access to women's spaces. You can't be a male rapist in a woman's jail. You can't go into female sports and compete unfairly. And that, for them, requires vengeance.
And the fact that the media has promoted it, and the fact that the mainstream politicians that we saw in New Zealand and Australia, that politician in Tasmania, using... Well, I don't know if I can say the word, but he used a different word for TERFs. But he changed it to TERDS, and he called Kelly J a dropkicker. And they've given a green light for violence against women.